All right, I want to show you the number one way that we can save money on our feed costs and also lower our inputs and lower our environmental footprint. One thing with poultry is that we use a lot of feed to feed these birds. And even though we're building our soil fertility and our carbon, putting more carbon in our soil, building our organic matter, we know that this feed is getting grown usually and not the best way on another farm and depleting the soil somewhere else. So one thing we can do to reduce our costs, our feed costs, and reduce our environmental input is to grow our own feed, right? That makes us more resilient to changes in the market, to pricing, makes us more self-reliant. So what we can do is we can seed out our pastures. This is my favorite way to do it. Here is a bucket of seed. In here we have wheat and oats. I think there's a little bit of rye as well. And what we do is we just take, if you don't have a tractor, you don't have an easy way to do this, to seed your pastures. You don't have a no-till drill and that kind of thing. And you want to do this easily and get good seed to soil contact and good growth, good germination, is you can take a bucket like this, 5-gallon bucket. We fill it half full of seed. We fill the other half with water. Let's go absorb this water, which is going to help it germinate. So we fill it half up with seed, and then we fill water up to the top of the seed here. And then we let it sit for a couple hours and really absorb that water. You can see here, seed starting to float. That should be enough water. Okay, so we're gonna let that sit, the seeds soak that water, and so we get a much better germination rate when that happens. Okay, here we are in our paddock. We've got our birds out here, and our seed is in the bucket. It has soaked for a couple hours, so now we're just gonna broadcast the seed out by hand. So I just take a handful like this and just kind of toss it out, right? And so you can see the seed on the ground. I'm just looking for uniform distribution. It doesn't have to be real thick. The birds are going to eat some. Yeah, this isn't exact science, but if you kind of cast it out like this, you get more of an even distribution. The birds will eat a small percentage, and that's okay. But what's going to happen is the majority of it will germinate, all right? And they're going to eat all this grass down. It's going to become bare soil. The birds eat this grass down. It becomes pretty much bare soil. And so it's perfect time for planting because they've been here, they've had their impact. You can see our seed distributed on the ground, right? The birds are going to pick up some of the seed, and that's okay. But this is a perfect planting platform. It doesn't have any grass, doesn't have any weeds, so it gives the seed an opportunity to germinate. And their little feet, they're walking around, are going to kind of push that seed into the soil, so it doesn't get eaten by crows, and it gets good seed to soil contact and good germination. And what we found is that if we just broadcasted this seed onto a pasture or onto a growing area, it would get almost no germination, right? Without tillage, without a drill, it's just not going to germinate. But because the ducks have already brought this down to bare soil, this will get really good germination. So we get the best germination when we see the paddocks that the duck is in or the ducks are going to. The ducks behind, if I seeded out a paddock where the birds had just been, we will get some germination because it is a bare ground, right? Because they've eaten all the grass, but it's not as good as if the paddocks that they're either currently in or moving to, because they don't trample it in. So there's a tip for you, an easy way to seed out your pasture, to grow a lot of your own feed. We'll let this wheat and this oat grow up and germinate. When the seed becomes mature on the stalk, we'll bring the birds in, we'll let them harvest the seed right off the stalk, and they love it. And it's a great way to supplement our feed, reduce our bill, and become more self-reliant. All right, so why do this? Why is this a big deal? Why do I get excited about this? Some of you might be thinking. Let's think about the economics of it real quick. Right now, feed costs are around $600 a ton is what I'm paying to buy feed in bulk, and that includes delivery. So about $600 a ton is what I'm paying. Depending where you are, I might pay a little bit more, a little bit less. Let's just use $600 a ton. Now, when you plan out a field, a pasture, you can get, depending on the species, it's going to be a lot of variables there. We're using generalities, right? Because depending on where you're located, your rainfall, your climate conditions, what species you're planting, etc., You can get anywhere from, maybe 750 pounds of grain, of feed out of that per acre, up to maybe 2 tons, 4,000 pounds of feed per acre, okay? Depending on what you're planting, your germination rate, etc., right? There's a lot that goes into that. But let's just say 1 ton per acre, okay? So I can buy a bag of wheat, say for about $15, a 50-pound bag of wheat, whole grain wheat for $15. That 50-pound bag will seed out a whole acre. So for $15, I can seed out a whole acre. If I get good germination, that'll produce about a ton of feed. So $15 I produce a ton of feed versus paying $600 for a ton of feed. That's a huge difference. That's a 40x difference, right? So that's enormous. So 40 times, the savings. Even if they just get, 25% of their diet from the whole grains that they harvest off the stalk, that's a huge savings as terms of feed costs, in terms of resiliency and being more self-reliant. So think about those numbers. And the best part about it is you don't need a whole lot of heavy equipment. If I was a farmer and I had tons of tractors and implements, and I had a no-till drill, and I was already growing grains, and I had a dryer, and I could grind it, and I could store it, and I could dry it, and then mix it and add protein and supplements, and then bring it out to my birds, that's great. But most of us small-scale producers aren't doing that. We don't have that kind of time. We don't have that kind of equipment. So this is a very easy, low-scale, easy to implement strategy to seed out your pastures. It takes me 5 minutes to fill up a bucket of feed, and another 5 minutes to scatter it out by hand. So very low tech, low cost investment, easy to implement strategy to save a lot on feed costs and be more self-reliant.